She stood at the head of that table like she was running a board meeting. Papers fanned out, a pen in her hand, family seated and ready to sign. She had been planning this for months, the moment she finally controlled everything Grandma left behind. What she did not know was that Grandma had been planning longer, 27 years longer. And I had just gotten off the phone with a lawyer.
If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. My name is Renata Caldwell. I'm 36 years old. I'm a high school guidance counselor. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Greensboro, North Carolina. And until 6 weeks after my grandmother's funeral, I thought the most important call I'd get that year was about my car insurance. I was at my desk during my lunch break when my cell phone buzzed. Unknown number, local area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. Ms. Caldwell, this is Tamari, calling from the offices of Warren Okafor, attorney at law. I'm calling on behalf of one of our clients. Well, a former client, Ida Mae Booker. I set down my fork. Ida Mae Booker was my grandmother. She had been gone for 6 weeks and 3 days. Stroke. 81 years old. She went in her sleep, in her own bed, in the house she'd owned for 38 years. The doctors said she didn't feel a thing. I chose to believe that. Mr. Okafor would like to schedule a time to meet with you in person, Tamara said. Her voice was warm but careful, the way people get when they know something you don't. He said to let you know he's been expecting your call, or, well, expecting to reach you. I'm sorry, I said. I've never heard of Mr. Okafor. Yes, ma'am. He said you wouldn't have. A brief pause. He also asked me to mention the meeting should just be you. He'd prefer to meet with you alone first. I said I'd come in on Thursday. After I hung up, I sat there for a minute looking at my sandwich. Then I looked at the wall. Then I picked my phone back up and almost called my mother before I caught myself. Something about the word alone made me stop. I need to back up. The day of my grandmother's funeral was a Saturday in October, cold the way October gets in North Carolina. Not bitter yet, just honest. The church was full. Ida Mae had lived in that same neighborhood for almost 40 years. She knew everybody, and everybody knew her. After the graveside service, I drove to her house. I don't know exactly why. I just needed to be somewhere that still smelled like her. That particular mix of Jergens lotion and the cedar blocks she kept in every closet and whatever she had been cooking last. I pulled into the driveway and the front door was unlocked. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Ida Mae locked her front door. Always had. Even when she was inside. I walked in and stood in the entryway, and it took me a few seconds to understand what I was looking at. The living room felt lighter than it should have. The china cabinet, the tall one she kept against the wall between the windows, was half empty. The good dishes were gone. The figurines she collected from church sales over 30 years, the little porcelain birds lined up on the middle shelf, gone. I went to the bedroom, the jewelry box on the dresser was open and nearly empty, not cleaned out dramatically, just picked over. The good pieces missing, the costume stuff left behind. I went to the kitchen. The silverware drawer pulled out and pushed back in, crooked. I already knew who had been here. I knew before I walked into the back room and saw the bookshelf. The family Bible was gone. Ida Mae kept our family tree in that Bible, going back 4 generations, births, marriages, deaths, all of it written in her handwriting in the front pages. She had added to it my whole life. When I graduated high school, she wrote it in there. When my marriage fell apart, she sat with me on the porch and said, I'm not writing that down because the next thing I write about you is going to be something good. She squeezed my hand and went inside. That Bible was her record of us, of all of us. My mother had taken it along with everything else. I stood in that back room for a while. The shelf still had a few paperbacks and some devotionals nobody wanted. I picked up a small cast iron pot from the corner of the kitchen counter. The little one Grandma used for single servings of grits, too small and heavy for anything dramatic. I carried it to my car. It was the only thing I took. My mother, Lorraine Caldwell, is 61 years old. She is pretty in the way some women are pretty, maintained, deliberate, aware of it. She does her hair every Friday. She wears good earrings to the grocery store. She has an opinion about your posture. She is also the most convincing person I have ever met. Not lying exactly, more like she tells a version of things so completely and so consistently that after a while it becomes the version everyone repeats. At the repast after the funeral, she was the grieving daughter. And I mean that. She wore black. She accepted hugs. She let the church ladies bring her plates of food and sit with her and tell her what a good daughter she had been to Ida May, how devoted, how present. Mama told me she wanted me to take care of things, she said to Mrs. Patterson from the usher board who was patting her hand. She knew I'd do right by the family. I was standing near the folding table with the sweet potato pies and the macaroni and cheese. I was holding a paper plate. I heard everything. My cousin Deja came and stood next to me. She didn't say anything. She just picked up a fork and put some macaroni on her plate, and we both stood there watching Lorraine receive comfort from people who had no idea that 3 days ago she had stripped half of Ida May's house, while the rest of us were buying plane tickets to get home. She took the Bible, I said quietly. Deja kept chewing. I know. The family Bible, with the I know, Renata. We stood there a little longer. My mother laughed softly at something Mrs. Patterson said. It was a real laugh. That was the thing about Lorraine. The performance was never fake. She genuinely believed her version. She had believed it for so long, she couldn't tell the difference anymore. I drove back to my apartment that night and sat in the parking lot for a few minutes before going inside. My apartment is not sad, exactly. It's small, comfortable. I have good curtains and a bookshelf I'm proud of, and a coffee maker that's been with me through 3 moves. When my marriage ended 4 years ago, I thought about moving somewhere new, somewhere nobody knew the story. I stayed. I like Greensboro. My kids, my students, I call them my kids, they're here. My work is here. The cast iron pot sat on my passenger seat the whole drive home. I put it on the stove that night and made grits, not because I was hungry, just because I needed to do something with my hands, and the pot was there, and making grits was what Ida May did when things were hard. You put some water on, you add the grits slow, you stir. You don't rush it. I ate them standing at the counter at 11 o'clock at night. I didn't call anyone. I didn't text. I just ate and washed the pot and set it on the drying rack and went to bed. After that, I started making grits most mornings, 6 a.m. before work, when the apartment was quiet and the light was still thin. I'd stand at the stove and stir and think about Ida May. Not sad thoughts, mostly. Just her. The way she said my name. The way she laughed at herself when she burned something. The way she said, without drama, whenever something went wrong, "All right, what do we do next?" The cast iron pot became my thing, my grounding thing. I didn't realize it was happening until one morning I couldn't find it, and I had to stop and breathe for a second before I found it in the cabinet where it was supposed to be. Some grief is like that. It hides in objects. Warren Okafor's office was on a side street downtown, 2 floors above a dry cleaner, in a building old enough to have a clanking radiator. The waiting area had framed photos of black families and civic events from the 60s and 70s, the kind of photography that makes you feel like you're looking at time itself. I got there 5 minutes early and sat on a wooden chair and did not know what I was about to find out. Warren Okafor was a tall man in his late 50s with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and the kind of calm that takes decades to develop. He shook my hand and led me to his office, which had exactly as much paper in it as you'd expect and a window that looked onto the street below. "Thank you for coming, Miss Caldwell." He sat down behind his desk. "I want you to know first, your grandmother was my client for 22 years. She was also one of the most deliberate people I have ever had the privilege of working with." I didn't know she had a lawyer, I said. She preferred it that way. He opened a folder on his desk. Ida May came to me in 1997. She had some things she wanted to put in order. She was very clear about what she wanted done, and very clear about who she wanted to know about it. He looked at me. Which was you, and only you until now. He reached into the folder and set a sealed envelope on the desk between us. It was cream-colored, slightly worn at the corners. My name was on the front in blue ballpoint pen, Ida May's handwriting. I knew it from 40 years of birthday cards and grocery lists and the note she slipped into my coat pocket the day I left for college. "I'd like you to have that," Warren said. "But before you open it, I want to walk you through what's inside, so you're not reading it alone without context." I left the envelope on the desk between us. I looked at it the whole time he talked. Warren started with the easy part. Your grandmother established a transfer-on-death brokerage account in your name in 2 stages. The first deposit in 1996 and a second, larger deposit in 2001. Because it is a transfer-on-death account, it passed directly to you upon her death. It is not part of the probate estate. It cannot be contested as part of the estate. He paused to let that land. The current value of that account is approximately $87,000. I looked at him. "I'm sorry," I said. $87,000. He said it again, the same pace, the same calm. "That is the current balance. Your grandmother was a careful investor. She worked with a financial advisor I referred her to. She checked the account every quarter for 20-some years." I set my hands flat on my knees. I could feel the seam of my slacks under my palms. "There's more," Warren said. He told me about the property. In 1988, Ida May Booker had purchased a small commercial building on the east side of town, a 2-unit strip. One side was a coin laundry that had been operating continuously since she bought it. The other side had been a barbershop for 12 years, then a tax preparation office, then a barbershop again. She had 2 long-term tenants. She collected rent every month. She had never told a soul. In 2002, she filed a quit-claim deed transferring the property to me. The deed was recorded with the county. It was legal. It was done. It had been done for 23 years. The property is currently assessed at around $110,000, Warren said. Though, given the rental income history, a real estate appraiser might value it higher. I sat there. The radiator in the corner ticked. "She never mentioned any of this," I said. "No, she was specific about that." Warren folded his hands on the desk. "She said she didn't want you making decisions based on what you might inherit. She wanted you to make your decisions on your own. And then, when the time came, she wanted you to know you were never as alone as you probably felt." I looked at the envelope on the desk. "Can I?" I said. "Of course." The paper was cream-colored and slightly thin, the kind you find in a stationery set. It smelled faintly of cedar. She had written in blue ink, her handwriting small and even and slightly slanted to the right, every letter connected to the next, the way women of her generation were taught to write. I read it twice in Warren's office. Then I folded it and held it in both hands for a moment. This is what it said. "Renata, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And Warren has finally gotten to do what I paid him to do all these years. I hope it wasn't a hard death. I hope I went easy. I hope you're all right. I want to explain some things to you because you deserve an explanation. I know what your mother is. I have known for a long time. I love Lorraine. She's my child and I will always love her. But I stopped trusting her in 1995 when she borrowed $4,000 from me for what she said was a car emergency. And then 6 months later, I heard her at your Aunt Patricia's birthday dinner telling someone that she'd found a way to get what she needed without working for it. She didn't know I was in the kitchen. She laughed when she said it. I stood at that kitchen sink and I let her laugh and I did not say a word. Then I came home and called Warren. I don't know what she'll do when I'm gone. I don't know exactly what she'll take or what she'll tell people, but I know her, and I know she won't be fair to you. She never has been. You were the quiet one. You were the one who showed up. You drove me to my appointments when nobody else could. You called on Thursdays because you knew that was my hard day. You didn't do those things for anything. You just did them because that's who you are. So I made sure you'd be taken care of. Everything Warren has is yours, legally and completely. Your mother has no claim to any of it. There is one more thing I want to say. You were always the one who came back, Renata. Every time. And I need you to know that I saw that. I always saw it. All my love, Grandma. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. Warren was quiet. He was a man who knew when to be quiet. She heard Lorraine laughing, I said. That's what she told me. I breathed out slow. And she never said anything to her about it. She said there was no point. She said Lorraine wouldn't have understood what she'd done wrong. Warren picked up his pen and set it down again. She said she'd rather spend her energy protecting you. I sat with that for a while. 27 years. Ida May had heard her daughter laugh about taking advantage of her and decided in that moment to build me a floor she'd never mention. 27 years of quarterly statements. 27 years of rental checks. 27 years of a secret she carried alone so I could live my life without the weight of it. I pressed the envelope against my chest and looked at the window and did not cry, exactly, but it was close. I had been home 3 days when my phone rang and it was Lorraine. This was not unusual. What was unusual was the tone. "Hey, baby," she said, warm, a little soft around the edges, the way she got when she wanted something. "I've been thinking about you. How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," I said. "I know it's been hard. It's been hard for me, too." She paused, and I could hear her breathing, and I knew she was about to redirect. "Hey, listen, I was thinking, why don't you come over Sunday? I'll cook. We haven't had a chance to just sit down together since everything happened." "I might be able to do that," I said. "I'll see how I'm feeling." Of course. No pressure." Another pause. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. When you were over at Mama's house, did you happen to find any paperwork? Like financial stuff, maybe? Bank statements, anything like that?" I looked at my reflection in the window above the kitchen sink. "Not that I remember," I said. "Oh, okay. Because I've been trying to track down all her accounts for the estate, you know, and I want to make sure we haven't missed anything. She was always so... You know how she was. Always squirreling things away." "She was," I said. "So if you think of anything, any envelopes or files she might have mentioned, I'll let you know, Mom." "Okay, baby, good. You sure you're doing all right?" "I'm fine," I said. "Thanks for calling." We said goodbye. I stood at the window for a while. Something had tipped her off. Maybe a piece of mail she'd found at Ida May's that she hadn't understood at the time. Maybe a neighbor who'd seen my car parked downtown. Maybe just instinct. Lorraine had very good instincts when money was involved. She was fishing. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for, but she knew something was there. I called Warren the next morning and told him about the call. He listened and said, "Don't confirm anything, don't deny anything directly, just wait." I said, "She's going to move." He said, "Let her." She moved fast. I'll give her that. 8 days later, Deja texted me a photo. No message, just the image. I had to enlarge it twice to read it. It was a handwritten note on a piece of lined paper. The handwriting was loose and uneven. Not Ida May's careful script, but something approximating it if you weren't paying close attention. At the top it said, "My final wishes regarding my estate." And then below that, in a hand that wobbled at the turns, "I want my daughter Lorraine to have full control of distributing my belongings to the family. She knows what I would have wanted. I trust her completely." At the bottom, there was something that was supposed to be a signature. Lorraine had sent it in a certified letter to every family member she could reach. She was calling it Ida May's Final Wishes. She was presenting it as official. I sat down on my couch and stared at that image for a long time. Here's the thing about a document like that. You can tell it isn't right. You can feel it in your chest. But feeling it and proving it are different things. And when it's your mother, and it's your grandmother's name, and it's in a handwriting that's close enough to real, there's this awful moment where you start to wonder if you're the one who's wrong. I spent 3 days in that wondering. 3 days of looking at the photo, comparing it in my memory to every birthday card, every grocery list, every note in a coat pocket. 3 days of Deja texting me, "What are you going to do?" 3 days of not sleeping right. On the 3rd day, I called Warren. "She sent something to the family," I said. A handwritten note. She's calling it Ida May's final wishes. Silence on his end. Then, "Can you send me a photo?" I forwarded Deja's text. I waited. He called me back in 20 minutes. "Come in tomorrow morning," he said. "Bring a clear head and give yourself some time after. I want to show you something." Warren's office was brighter in the morning. He had the photo I'd sent him printed out on one side of his desk, and on the other side, he had a legal pad with notes. "Let's start with the document your mother is circulating," he said. He put on his reading glasses. "No witnesses, no notarization, no date, and that matters, because a statement of final wishes has to have a date to be considered for any legal purpose. The handwriting," he tapped the photo, "is not consistent with documents Ida May signed in my presence over 22 years. It's close, but the pressure is wrong and the letter formations are inconsistent." I exhaled. "But here's what matters more," he said. He opened a folder and slid a document across the desk to me. 3 years before she died, Ida May came in and signed this. It is a notarized affidavit, witnessed by myself and my paralegal. It states, specifically, that it is her explicit wish that Lorraine Caldwell not have sole discretion over any personal property from her estate, and that any such claims by Lorraine Caldwell should be considered inconsistent with her true intentions. I looked at the date, the signature. Ida May's real handwriting. She had anticipated this. She had walked into this office 3 years before she died and said, in legal language, in front of witnesses, on record, "I know what my daughter is going to do when I'm gone. Do not let her." Ida May was a very deliberate woman, Warren said again, the same way he'd said it the first time. "She really was," I said. The 3 days of doubt dissolved. What was left in its place was something quieter, not anger, not even satisfaction, exactly, just clarity. My grandmother had been 3 moves ahead the whole time. She had played this out in her mind, accounted for every play Lorraine might make, and built a wall around it before she ever got sick. I picked up the affidavit and read it again slowly. "What do we do now?" I asked. Warren leaned back in his chair. "We wait for the meeting," he said. My Aunt Phyllis lives in Memphis. She is 73 years old and she does not travel much anymore. But she keeps her phone close and she has opinions about everything, which she shares crisply and without apology. She is Ida May's younger sister. She is the person who knew Ida May best. She called me on a Thursday evening while I was heating up soup. "Renata," she said, not a question, just my name, the way older women say it when they have been thinking about you. "Aunt Phyllis." I turned down the stove. "Did you get Lorraine's letter?" "I got it," she said. "That is not your grandmother's handwriting." "I know." "I have 40 years of birthday cards from your grandmother. I know her handwriting. That is not it." A pause. "What is Lorraine doing?" "She's trying to take control of the estate. She thinks there's more to get." Phyllis was quiet for a moment. Then, "There is something I want to tell you. I don't know if it'll help, but I think you should hear it." She told me about 1995. She said Lorraine had borrowed money from Ida May. She thought it was $4,000, maybe more, and told her it was for a car. Lorraine said she'd pay it back in 3 months. She never did. Never mentioned it again. "About a year later," Phyllis said, Your grandmother drove down to Memphis and we spent a weekend together. Saturday afternoon, she started crying at my kitchen table, just sitting there with her coffee and crying. I asked her what was wrong, and she said she'd heard Lorraine make a joke about it. At somebody's birthday party, she'd heard her laughing about how she knew how to work people or something like that. And your grandmother didn't say a word to her. She just absorbed it. You know how she was? I leaned against the counter. Yeah. She cried that Saturday afternoon, and then we had dinner and she never brought it up again, not once. Years went by. She never mentioned it. Phyllis paused, but I watched her change after that. She got very quiet about certain things, very careful. I didn't know what she was planning. She never told me the details, but I knew she was planning something. I told Aunt Phyllis about Warren, about the accounts, the property, the letter. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Your grandmother cried about it, and then she made a decision. That's who she was." I said, "Lorraine called a family meeting." Phyllis said, "When?" I told her Sunday. She said, "You tell me what time." I will pick up the phone. Lorraine sent the text on a Thursday night at 8:15. I know because I was already in bed trying to sleep, and my phone lit up the room. "Hey family, I am pulling everyone together Sunday at 1 o'clock at my house to finalize some details about Mama's estate. Please bring a photo ID. This won't take long. We just need to make it official. Love, Lorraine." Deja texted me 45 seconds later, a screenshot of the same message, followed by 3 question marks. Then, what is she finalizing? Renata, what does she know I put my phone face down on the nightstand and looked at the ceiling? I thought about what Warren had said, about Ida May walking into his office 3 years before she died, sitting in that wooden chair and signing her name to a document that said clearly and officially, "I know what is coming. Here is the wall." I picked my phone back up. "I'll explain everything," I texted Deja. "But not tonight. Come to my place Saturday morning." I put the phone down again. The apartment was quiet. The cast iron pot was on the stove, already washed and dry from morning. I looked at it from the bed. All right, I thought. What do we do next? Saturday morning, I told Deja everything. She sat at my kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, and she listened without interrupting, which is unusual for Deja. When I was done, she sat there for a while. "The laundromat on East Side," she said. "That's the one. I've been going to that laundromat my whole life." "I know." She looked at the table. "Ida May owned that?" "For 35 years. Deja shook her head slowly. "Your grandmother was something else." Saturday night, I sat at the kitchen table alone with Grandma's letter open in front of me. I had read it so many times by then that I had most of it memorized, but I read it again anyway. I read the part about Lorraine laughing in the kitchen. I read the part about the quiet Thursdays, the appointments, the showing up. You were always the one who came back. I called Warren at 9 o'clock. He answered on the first ring. "I'll be there at 12:45, he said before I could ask. "You walk in at 1. "Thank you." "Your grandmother was a careful woman," he said. "The least I can do is make sure her work lands right." After we hung up, I texted Deja one word: "Come early." Then I closed the letter, folded it carefully, put it back in its cream envelope, and set it in my bag. I washed the dinner dishes. I set the cast iron pot on the back burner where I always keep it. I went to bed. I actually slept. Lorraine's house is in a nice part of Greensboro. 4 bedrooms, good kitchen, decorative plates on the walls that nobody eats off of. She has lived there for 11 years. She refinanced it twice. These are details I would only understand later. I got there at 1 o'clock exactly. Warren was already parked on the street. He got out of his car when he saw me pull up. He was wearing a gray suit and carrying a leather briefcase, and he looked like what he was. A man who had been waiting a long time to do this particular job. The dining room was set like a meeting. Documents laid out, one at each place. A man I didn't recognize was sitting at the far end of the table, younger, hair cut close. The kind of suit that said he billed by the hour, Lorraine's lawyer. She'd hired him from somewhere out of town, which meant she'd already spent money she was expecting to get back. Lorraine was at the head of the table in a cream blouse and good earrings. Her hair was done. She had a pen in her hand. Deja and her mother were already seated on one side. 3 cousins I hadn't seen in years were on the other side, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. My Uncle Jerome was in the corner near the window, hands in his lap, not making eye contact with anyone. Lorraine looked up when I walked in. Then she looked at Warren behind me. "Who is this?" she said. "This is Warren Okafor," I said. "He was Grandma's attorney." Something moved across Lorraine's face. Not panic, more like a calculation happening in real time, very fast. She smoothed it over before anyone else would have noticed. I noticed. "Mama didn't have an attorney," she said. "She did," Warren said. He set his briefcase on the table without fanfare, beside Lorraine's documents. "For 22 years. The room had gone very still. I didn't take the seat Lorraine had positioned for me at the far end of the table. I stayed near the door, standing. I set my bag on the back of the nearest chair, and I looked at my mother. "Before anyone signs anything," I said, "I need to share something Grandma left." Lorraine's jaw tightened, just slightly. "Renata, we're here to finalize." "I know what we're here to finalize." I kept my voice even. "Give me 5 minutes first, then you can do whatever you want." Nobody moved. Nobody signed anything. Lorraine sat down slowly, still holding her pen. I took the envelope from my bag. I placed my phone on the table in front of me, face up. I had already called Aunt Phyllis. She was on the line, the call open, sound coming through low. I turned the volume up just slightly, enough that her presence in the room was real. "Aunt Phyllis," I said, "can you hear us?" Her voice came through clear, that Memphis drawl she never lost. "I hear you, baby. Go ahead." Lorraine looked at the phone. Then she looked at me. I opened the envelope and unfolded the letter. I read it aloud, slowly. I didn't perform it. I didn't try to make it dramatic. I just read it, the way you read something that means something to you, where every word has weight and you want to give it its full weight. I read the part about the brokerage account and the property. I heard someone shift in their chair. I read the part about Lorraine borrowing money in '95 and never mentioning it again. Then I got to the part about the birthday dinner, the kitchen, the laughing. I read. I stood at that kitchen sink and I let her laugh, and I did not say a word. Then I came home and called Warren. The room was absolutely quiet. "That's true," Aunt Phyllis said from the phone. Her voice was calm and level, and it filled the room. "I was sitting in that kitchen in Memphis when your grandmother cried about it. One Saturday afternoon. She cried, and then she made her decision. That's who Ida May was." I didn't look at my mother yet. I kept reading. I read the part about Thursdays, the appointments, the coming back. I read the last line. "You were always the one who came back, Renata. Every time. And I need you to know that I saw that. I always saw it." I folded the letter. I set it on the table. Then I looked at Lorraine. Her face had done something I had never seen it do. She was working very hard to keep it together. Her mouth was pressed into a line. Her hands were flat on the table. Her knuckles weren't white. She was too controlled for that. But there was a tension in her jaw that traveled all the way down to her shoulders. Deja was looking at the table. Jerome had finally looked up from his lap. The cousins had not moved. "Phyllis," Lorraine said, her voice thin, "you don't know what you're talking about." "I know what your mama told me in my kitchen," Phyllis said, "and I know what your mama's handwriting looks like, and that letter you sent around last week was not it." The room held its breath. Lorraine stood up. She didn't yell. That was never her style. She got quieter when she was losing, not louder. She turned to the room. "I don't know what this is," she said. "I don't know who put Renata up to this or what that man," she gestured at Warren, "has told her. but I am Ida Mae Booker's daughter. I spent 30 years driving her to appointments. I spent 30 years making sure that woman had what she needed, and now my own daughter is standing in my house." "Mrs. Caldwell," Warren said. Lorraine stopped. He didn't raise his voice. He hadn't raised it once since he walked through the door. "The transfer on death brokerage account," he said, "was established in Renata's name in 1996. The quitclaim deed transferring the commercial property on East Side was recorded in 2002. Both instruments are outside your mother's probate estate. They passed directly to your daughter at the moment of Ida Mae's death." He opened his briefcase and set a folder on the table. "I also have a notarized affidavit signed by Ida Mae Booker 3 years before she died, stating explicitly that she did not wish Lorraine Caldwell to have sole discretion over her personal property, and that any such claims by Lorraine Caldwell should be considered inconsistent with her true intentions." He closed the briefcase. "There is nothing to contest here, legally. Your daughter is the sole owner of these assets. The document you circulated to the family does not meet any legal standard and cannot override recorded instruments." He paused. "I'm happy to answer any questions about the legal framework." Lorraine sat down. It happened slowly, like something draining out. She sat down, and her hands went flat on the table again, and her mouth closed, and for the first time in my memory, for the first time in 36 years of watching this woman manage every room she walked into, she had nothing, no version, no pivot, no performance ready. Just Grandma's letter on the table and Warren's folder beside it, and Phyllis's voice still coming quietly from my phone, and the room full of people who had just heard, in a dead woman's own handwriting, exactly who Lorraine Caldwell was. The clock on Lorraine's mantel ticked. A car went by outside. Jerome cleared his throat once and looked at the window. I picked up my phone. "Thank you, Aunt Phyllis." "You call me tonight," she said. "I mean it." I said I would. I ended the call. Nobody signed anything. Nobody even reached for a pen. Deja drove me home. We didn't talk much on the way. She had the radio on low, something soft, and we just rode. When she pulled into my parking lot, she put the car in park, and we sat there with the engine running for almost an hour. I don't know what we talked about exactly. Little things. Nothing related to what had just happened. She told me about her job. I told her about a student I was worried about. At some point, she reached over and squeezed my hand once and then let go, and we kept talking about nothing until it felt okay to go inside. That was the most useful thing anyone did for me that whole week. The rest of it was messier. My cousin Marcus called Tuesday night and apologized, not for anything specific, just a general apology, the kind that means I was in that room and I didn't do anything and I'm sorry. I told him it was all right. I don't know if it was, but I said it. Jerome texted me on Wednesday. Your grandmother would be proud. That was the whole message. I stared at it for a while and then texted back, "Thank you, Uncle Jerome," and put my phone face down on the desk. Lorraine called twice that week. I didn't answer either time. I listened to the voicemails later, standing in the kitchen. The first one was angry. She said I had humiliated her in her own house. She said I had turned the family against her. She said she didn't know who had gotten in my head, but she knew I wasn't smart enough to do this alone. The second one was different. It came 2 days after the first. Her voice was smaller. She said she was overwhelmed with the estate and she needed help. She needed someone to talk to. She said we could figure this out together if I would just call her back. She never said she was sorry, not in either voicemail. She said she needed help. That was the closest she got. I saved both messages. Then I set my phone on the counter and made dinner. Warren sent me the paperwork 2 weeks later, and I spent one Saturday morning at his office going through everything. Account numbers, property records, tenant lease agreements, 2 months of back rent that had been sitting in a holding account since Ida Mae passed, waiting for a named owner to appear. The first thing I did was pay off my student loans. $31,000, a number I had been looking at for 12 years. I made the payment online sitting at my kitchen table at 7 in the morning, the cast iron pot on the stove behind me. The confirmation screen came up and I looked at it for a while. Then I closed the laptop. I sat there expecting to feel something dramatic. I didn't exactly. It was more like quiet. Like a sound I'd stopped noticing a long time ago had suddenly stopped. I set up an emergency fund. For the first time in my adult life, a broken water heater or a car repair was just an expense, not a crisis. I don't know how to explain what that does to you, that particular kind of breathing room. It changes something in your chest. The laundromat I didn't touch right away. I needed to see it first. I drove there on a Saturday in November. It was on a corner I'd passed 100 times. Brick building, 2 storefronts, the coin laundry on the left with a hand-painted sign above the door that said, "Clean and Go" in red and yellow letters. Inside, through the glass, I could see the rows of machines, a few people folding clothes, a woman reading on her phone while a dryer ran. Ida May had owned this building for 35 years. She had never said a word. I sat in my car across the street and looked at it for a long time. At the sign, at the people inside, at the ordinary, unremarkable Wednesday morning life of a building where people showed up every week to take care of something basic and necessary. She built this, I thought. She kept this going for 35 years. Quiet, steady, and she left it to me. I didn't go inside that day. I just drove home and made grits and called Aunt Phyllis, and we talked for an hour and a half about nothing and everything. And somewhere in the middle of it, I started crying and Phyllis just waited and then said, "I know, baby. I know." Lorraine's house went on the market in February. I found out from Deja, who saw the listing online and sent me the link without comment. I clicked it. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, listed at $289,000. The photos showed the dining room where we'd all sat in November. The decorative plates were still on the wall. I knew a little bit by then about Lorraine's finances. Not from snooping, from the things that come out when a family stops performing for each other. She had been carrying significant credit card debt for years. She had refinanced the house twice. She had been counting on Ida May's estate to cover a gap that had been growing for a long time. She had been counting on it, and it was not there, and now she was selling the house. I didn't feel satisfaction about that. I want to be honest about that. I watched my mother lose her house the way you watch something burn out, with a kind of heavy, tired attention. She had made those choices. They had consequences. That was true, and it was also not something I could feel good about because she was still my mother and there is no clean way to feel about your mother. I wrote her a letter in March, longhand on notebook paper, the kind my students write their essays on. "Mom, I'm not closing the door on us. But I can't have a relationship built on pretending this didn't happen or on you needing things from me before you've been honest about what you did. When you're ready to have that conversation, the real one, I'll be here. I love you. That part hasn't changed." Renata. I sealed it and drove to the post office and put it in the blue box on the corner and didn't wait for a reply. I'm still waiting. I don't know if it will come. I've stopped trying to predict what my mother will do. What I know is this. Every Sunday morning I wake up at 6 and I make grits in that little cast iron pot. I stand at the stove and stir and I think about Ida May. Not with grief anymore, mostly. More like company. Like she's there in the kitchen with me. The way she always was when things needed thinking through. The laundromat has good tenants. The machines run 6 days a week. Warren helped me understand what a property manager does, and I found one I trust. I'm not a landlord in any way I would have imagined for myself, but there it is. Grandma left me a building that takes care of people's basic necessities. That feels right in a way I didn't expect. Grandma's letter is in my kitchen drawer. I put it in a Ziploc bag to protect it from moisture. I take it out sometimes, not as often as I used to. I know most of it by heart now, but I like seeing her handwriting. I like the way her letters connect to each other. I like reading the line at the end, "You were always the one who came back," and knowing that she meant it and that she said it, officially in a sealed envelope with my name on the front, left in a lawyer's office to wait until I was ready. She couldn't protect me from everything. That was never the offer. The offer was that she would make sure I had a floor, that when things got hard, and she knew they would, she knew exactly how they would, I would not be standing over nothing. She was right. I wasn't. I'm not rich. I'm a guidance counselor. I still drive a 7-year-old Civic. I still live in the 2-bedroom apartment in Greensboro that I moved into after my divorce because the rent was right. But the loans are gone. The emergency fund is real. The building on East Side keeps running. And every morning I have my grandmother's pot and her letter and the particular quiet of 6 a.m. before the world gets loud again. That's enough. That's more than enough. She knew it would be. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.